Jill Dando, known and loved by millions, has been brutally murdered. The 37-year-old presenter died in hospital after being found shot through the head on her own doorstep. Tonight in West London, a massive police hunt for the well-dressed man seen running away down the street in which she lived.
The shocking murder of Jill Dando, a beloved TV icon, left Britain in disbelief.
Good evening. The TV personality Jill Dando, who as Crimewatch presenter helped to send dozens of criminals to jail, was murdered on her own doorstep today. She was killed by a single gunshot to her head.
Shot in broad daylight on her doorstep, this high-profile case quickly became one of the most mysterious and chilling crimes in British history.
The detective who led the investigation into Jill Dando's murder has told the BBC her case will never be solved. In a documentary to mark 20 years since the news presenter was shot outside her home in Fulham, Hamish Campbell said he didn't think that any new suspects would be brought to court. Barry George was jailed for the murder but acquitted and released after a retrial.
With dozens of suspects, numerous theories, and no clear answers, the truth behind Jill's murder still haunts us. What happened that fateful day? Who pulled the trigger? Keep watching, because the secrets surrounding this crime are more twisted than you could ever imagine. Jill Dando's fame. Jill Dando was one of Britain's most beloved television presenters, a name known to millions for her charismatic presence on screen. Starting her career in local newspapers, Jill quickly rose through the ranks, securing a spot at the BBC. Her warm personality and natural charm made her a favorite among viewers, and she soon became one of the most recognizable faces in British television. Jill was more than just a news presenter, she became a staple of British media. She hosted Holiday, a popular BBC program, and presented Songs of Praise. But perhaps most famously, she was known for her work on Crimewatch, where she helped the public solve unsolved crimes, becoming a trusted figure in the process. Her image was that of the perfect girl next door, approachable, friendly, and deeply loved. Her role as a television personality transcended her professional work. She became a figure of trust and admiration. In a career full of highs, Jill Dando had everything: fame, success, and the respect of her audience. But her sudden and tragic death would cast a shadow over her legacy, leaving the nation shocked and devastated. The day of the murder, on the morning of Monday, April 26, 1999, Jill Dando's day began like any other. She was staying at her fiancé Alan Farthing's home in Chiswick, West London, where she had spent the night. Alan, a consultant gynecologist who would later become the Queen's private physician, left for work around 10 a.m. Jill's last known movements that day were meticulously tracked. CCTV, eyewitnesses, and even till receipts from local shops painted a clear picture. She drove to her own home at 29 Gowan Avenue, Fulham, where the unthinkable would happen. She made a stop in Hammersmith doing some shopping at Raman's, before heading back to her home. At around 11:30 a.m., Jill parked her car outside her house, a familiar beep echoing down the street. Her neighbor, Richard Hughes, heard the sound and then a chilling scream. But no gunshot. He saw a man hurrying away from the scene moments later, likely the killer. At 11:23 a.m., Jill had taken her last phone call. By 11:31 a.m., she was already dead, shot execution style on her doorstep. The peaceful street had become the scene of a horrifying crime. Witness accounts, the moments following Jill Dando's murder, were critical but also shrouded in confusion. Her next-door neighbor, Richard Hughes, was one of the few people to have seen anything that day. He had heard the familiar sound of Jill's BMW convertible pulling up at around 11:30 a.m. Then, a chilling scream pierced the air. But what he didn't hear was the gunshot. Instead, he heard the sound of Jill's gate clanging open. When he looked out the window, he saw a man hurriedly walking away from the scene. This was the only confirmed sighting of someone near the crime scene. The description from Richard Hughes would later become a pivotal piece of evidence, although the killer's identity remained unknown. Jill's body was found moments later, and despite the efforts of the paramedics, she was already likely dead before hitting the ground. The confusion at the scene, with multiple people attempting to help, compromised any forensic evidence. What was once a potential treasure trove of clues became a chaotic crime scene, making the investigation even more difficult for the police. The lack of clear witnesses or audio evidence only deepened the mystery of Jill's tragic death. Suspect theories. As the investigation into Jill Dando's murder unfolded, a multitude of theories emerged, each one more baffling than the last. Initially, the execution-style nature of the killing led many to believe was the work of a professional hitman. Jill was a well-known public figure with a wide reach, and this led to speculation that her murder could have been a targeted assassination. One of the first and most persistent theories was that the killing was a revenge contract, possibly ordered by a career criminal. Some even speculated that it was the work of a notorious Serbian warlord. Jill had appeared on a BBC program just weeks before her death, raising funds for refugees affected by the ethnic cleansing in Kosovo, which had placed her in direct opposition to the Serbian regime. The theory suggested that her murder could have been retaliation for her role in promoting humanitarian aid. However, the police were cautious of this theory, and as the investigation progressed, they began to focus on other possible leads. One of the more shocking ideas was that Jill had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, a victim of a random attack by someone who took advantage of the moment. With hundreds of suspects to eliminate, the investigation grew increasingly complex, yet the true motive for her murder remained elusive. The investigation into Jill Dando's murder quickly became one of the most complex and high-profile in British history. Detectives initially explored many different leads and theories, including the possibility of a professional hitman targeting the beloved television presenter. With hundreds of suspects to sift through, including Jill's colleagues, friends, and even her neighbors, the police faced the daunting task of narrowing down the list. One of the more persistent theories was that Jill had been murdered on the orders of a Serbian warlord in retaliation for her involvement in a BBC program that had raised awareness of the conflict in Kosovo. However, after extensive investigation, this theory was debunked when a key Serbian suspect was proven to have an alibi, ruling out the possibility of a political assassination. After months of investigating, the focus shifted to a man living just 500 yards from Jill's home, Barry George, a known sex offender and fantasist. George had a history of stalking BBC female celebrities, including Jill. Evidence found at his flat, including photographs of women and BBC magazines, led the police to believe he was involved in the crime. Despite the lack of solid forensic evidence linking him directly to the murder, Barry George was arrested, tried, and convicted in 2001. Unsolved mystery. Nearly 25 years have passed since Jill Dando's tragic murder, and the case remains one of the most enduring mysteries in British criminal history. Despite numerous theories, hundreds of suspects, and a highly publicized investigation, the identity of her killer remains unknown. The case took several unexpected turns, with the police investigating theories ranging from a politically motivated assassination by a Serbian warlord to a random act of violence by an obsessed stalker. In the end, the lack of solid evidence and the chaos at the crime scene left detectives with more questions than answers. Barry George's conviction, which was overturned years later, added further confusion, casting doubt on whether he had been wrongly accused. Even now, experts and members of the public continue to speculate on what really happened that day in April 1999. Jill Dando was murdered in broad daylight on a quiet street, and yet no one saw a thing. Theories and suspects continue to surface, but after decades, the killer remains at large, leaving the question unanswered. Why was Jill Dando murdered, and who was responsible for this heinous crime? The investigation may have stalled, but the mystery still haunts both her family and the public. Jill Dando's murder remains an unsolved enigma, a case that has baffled both the public and investigators for over 2 decades. Was it a professional hit, a random act of violence, or something even darker? The mystery lingers on, and we need your thoughts. Who do you think killed Jill Dando? Drop your theories in the comments below. And if you want to dive deeper into some of the UK's most baffling crimes, hit that subscribe button! Don't miss our next video, UK's most notorious unsolved heist, the Baker Street robbery mystery, coming soon!